Hello, y'all. How are y'all doing? I'm going to wait just a second to see if we get anybody log on, but I do believe that we are live. Welcome. This is day one of our study through the Minor Prophets. We are going to be meeting every week at 7 Central Time on Tuesdays for the next 12 weeks, and we're going to be going through each minor prophet. So each week we'll take a minor prophet, and I am so excited about this study. These are such little gems that we often neglect and sometimes we forget they're there. And once you dive into them, like there's so many treasures in the minor prophets. And so they are amazing. And we're starting with what is probably my favorite book of the entire Bible. And I know if you've been around long enough, you hear me say that about all the books of the Bible. But this one, like, seriously, if there's one book that stays in my top three over and over again, it's Hosea, hands down. And part of the reason is because Hosea, more than any other book of the Bible, you can clearly see the heart of God laid bare. And it's just the most beautiful thing. It's so exciting. So I can't wait to dive into this with you. So welcome again. We're here for 12 weeks. This is going to be an exciting study. We're also going to have a giveaway at the end. I think Aaron is the last lesson. And so we are going to be giving away 3 of our Finer Grounds Bible study books. So if you participate, if you comment on the videos, every comment is going to be an entry. And so you can come back later and comment on a verse that you read that week that was meaningful to you. We challenge you every week to go read the book. I would recommend before we start, read the book. And then after our lesson, read the book again. These are short. In fact, Hosea is 13 chapters, and it's probably one of the longest ones. Well, it is one of the longest ones. It may not be the longest, 14 chapters. But it's close to it. Some of them are like 1 or 2 chapters. So you got it. And then comment with what you've learned, what you love about this minor prophet, maybe a verse that really spoke to you, that touched your heart. We love collaboration here. We love sharing. We love this online forum so that we can communicate with y'all around the world. We have a boots on the ground retreat in the fall, and it's wonderful and it's fantastic, but we have to cap it at like 110. And so we always hate that we can't spread the love to everyone. So this is our way of spreading the love to everybody. We get a virtual retreat every year. So there you go. And if somebody doesn't have Facebook, because I know inevitably there are people without Facebook, and you would like to share this with them, we will be, Maddie McCarty, the wonderful and amazing, she's going to be taking these videos, pulling them down, putting them up on YouTube and on our website. So these videos will be able to access all the time. So this will be fantastic. All right, let us dive into Hosea. We've got half an hour. We're going to hit the ground running. All right, Hosea. This one is a gut punch. I'm not going to lie. If you can get through the story of Hosea and the book of Hosea without tearing up, I don't know. I don't know, because I can't ever. It's powerful, and it's meant to be powerful. It's meant to hit us in the emotional heart, and it's meant to show us what God feels about us. And if you have friends, and you've probably heard this, where people will say, I love the God of the New Testament, but the God of the Old Testament, he's awful. And it kind of makes me scratch my head, because I'm thinking, did you actually read the Old Testament or just hear about some things that happened in it? Because if you actually read the Old Testament and read especially this book, you can't walk away thinking the God of the Old Testament is unloving, first of all. And second of all, they're the same God. Like, that's weird. But a lot of people will say that. All right, so let's start with chapter 1. This is in the time period of, I want to say around 750 to 722 BC, somewhere in there, the last remaining days of the northern kingdom. And this is one of the only minor prophets that was written to the northern kingdom because, well, the northern kingdom didn't last very long. Most of them are written towards the southern kingdom. And I apologize in advance. I may have sketchy internet. Hopefully it stays, but we have a storm outside and sometimes that makes my internet wonky. Um anyway, so we're at the last bit of the northern kingdom. It's a very tumultuous time. I mean, in the course of like 20 or 30 years, you've got 6 different kings at the very end. And there's assassinations and there's coups and there's all sorts of stuff. It's a very violent time. It's a very tumultuous time. It's a very harrowing time to live in this northern kingdom. And Hosea is going to preach a message. And what we see in the structure of the book of Hosea is the first 3 chapters are going to be the story of Hosea. The second chapter kind of takes on the character of God a little bit, but then after the story of Hosea, then you have a break. And chapters 4 through 14 are kind of Hosea's sermons for the rest of the time. And they're not necessarily in chronological order, they're just kind of topical sermons that he gives to the people of the northern kingdom, and actually one or two to warn Judah, saying, listen, if you don't shape up, like the northern kingdom is about to get taken over, and if you don't shape up, you will too. So this is, there's a lot packed in here, and I recommend, again, we can't cover it all in 30 minutes, but hopefully I can give you enough of a foothold that you can sit down and you can read it and process it. All right, so let's start here with the story of Hosea in chapter 1 verse 2. When the Lord spoke to Hosea, the Lord said to Hosea, go take yourself a wife of harlotry and have children of harlotry, for the land commits flagrant harlotry, forsaking the Lord. So he went and took Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim, and she conceived and bore him a son. Okay. The prophets were asked to do some really awful things. It was not a fun job to be a prophet. I can only imagine if you're Hosea and you grew up as a good Jewish young man that you were looking forward to marrying a good Jewish young lady. And then all of a sudden God comes to you and says, guess what, Hosea, I have something different in mind for you. You're going to go marry a prostitute. Okay. But he does what he's asked. We don't see him balking. He might have. I can only imagine this would have been an emotional ask. But we don't see that part. So he goes and he marries Gomer. And Gomer, and I want you to pay attention to this language because it says here in verse 3, Gomer conceived and bore him a son. And the Lord said to him, name him Jezreel. For yet a little while I will punish the house of Jehu for the bloodshed of Jezreel, and I will put an end to the kingdom of the house of Israel. Okay, so she bears him a son. Now, if you keep reading, pay attention. Language is important, and the way things are said are important. Okay, then she conceived. We're skipping down to verse 6. Then she conceived again and gave birth to a daughter, and the Lord said, name her Lo Ruhamah, for I no longer have compassion on the house of Israel. Okay, no compassion, no mercy is what Lo Ruhamah means. But pay attention here. Earlier it said she bore him, Hosea, a son. Here it just says she gave birth to a daughter. She gave birth, like, there is an entire likelihood this daughter is not Hosea's, especially if you pay attention to the names. And you keep going, and we keep going to verse 8. When she had weaned Lo Ruhamah, she gave birth to a son, and the Lord said, name him Lo Ami, for you are not my people, and I'm not your God. Okay, again, she gave birth to a son. Very different from the language where she gave him a son, right? She bore him a son. It's likely that these 2 last children are not Hosea's, and that's gut-wrenching. And what God asks him to name them is gut-wrenching. Lo Ami means you're not my people. Can you imagine being Hosea and having to call your son and say, hey, not mine, come over here? And every time you called him, it was a reminder that he wasn't yours. That's an awful thing. Like, that is incredibly emotional. But there's a reason. Keep going. Um, Yet the number of the sons of Israel will be like the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured or numbered. And in his place, where it is you said to them, you're not my people, it will be said to them, you are the sons of the living God. Now, here we get kind of a prophetic snippet. Here's why God wants him to name these people, these. And if you'll keep your finger here and turn to First Peter chapter 2, you see this come to fruition in a beautiful way. This verse is quoted. When Peter is talking about them being built together as a holy temple for the Lord, for the purpose of the Lord's work, and he's talking about them combining, like they are the church now. He has given them a way to save. And he talks about Christ either being your building block or your stumbling block, right? He says Christ can be either. He can be the thing you build your house around, or he can be your stumbling block. And here in the midst of that context is what when he says, if you look at 1 Peter 2 verse 9, but you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for God's own possession, so that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who has called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. For you were once not a people, but now you were the people of God. You had not received mercy, right? There's no mercy there, but now you have received mercy. And then he goes on and says, beloved, I urge you as aliens and strangers to abstain from the fleshly lusts that wage war against your soul. And so Peter is picking up on this theme and saying, now you're mine. And from the get-go, Hosea is tough. There's hard things in Hosea, but right from chapter 1, even with the punishment, he combines it with hope. And right off the bat, even though he's saying, you're not mine, you're not my people, I'm not having mercy on you, then he says, eventually I will, though. Eventually. You're going to go through this period of justice, but mercy's going to come. And that's the hard thing for us to grasp sometimes, and especially reading through the prophets and things, because it feels doom and gloom and danger. But there's always a ray of hope. God doesn't ever just leave it sad for us. He always gives us the window into hope. And here is no different. He's always making sure we understand that as long as there's breath in our body, there's time to come back to God. And while we love to talk about God's mercy, God is also infinitely just, and he's got to fulfill his word. And when he tells the Israelites that if they do XYZ, and we're going to look at that in a minute, they're going to suffer punishment, he's got to fulfill that, or else he's not a just God. But mixed with that just nature comes an enormous amount of mercy. And we're going to see that firsthand in the story of Hosea. So if we go through chapter 2, and we're going to bounce back to chapter 2 in a minute, but I want to kind of summarize the story part of Hosea. So he marries Gomer. Gomer kind of runs off on him. Actually, Gomer ends up running around and thinking like her lovers, her boyfriends are paying for her things, but it's really Hosea that's providing for her, and she's giving them all the credit. And then finally she just leaves. And Hosea is left to his own devices. And you think, okay, this story's over. That was horrible. And then if you look in chapter 3, God has another ask for him. And in chapter 3, it says, the Lord said to me, go again and love a woman who is loved by her husband, yet an adulteress, even as the Lord loves the sons of Israel, though they turn to other gods and love raisin cakes. Okay, so he says, you got to go get her. She's gone. You got to go get her. And where he finds her is just awful, because we find Gomer for sale. So obviously, when she ran away, thinking there was a promise of something better on the outside, thinking that there was something that she could get that was better than Hosea, than better for her stable life, where Hosea had rescued her, it ended up badly for her, and she ended up for sale. She ended up for sale like a slave. And so here Hosea says, it says, chapter 3, verse 2, so I bought her for myself for 15 shekels of silver and an omer and a half of barley. Okay, there's a lot packed into this verse. First of all, I cannot imagine being Gomer and standing on the slave auction block, and you see Hosea walking up and understanding fully with certainty that he has every right under the Israelite law to stone you and put you to death. That was the right. And the fear, the trepidation, and not just that, maybe she knew he was a good enough guy not to put her to death, but understanding the hurt you had caused by running away, by leaving, like all of that packed into watching him approach. And and truthfully, here's the true thing. Hosea could have bought her back as a slave and treated her that way, and it would have been totally fair. It would have been fair for him to put her to death. It would have been fair for him to treat her as a slave, but it says he takes her as a wife and he restores her to that place of honor. That's humbling. That's incredibly humbling. And this cost that's paid, 15 shekels of silver and an omer and a half of barley. Okay, the price for a wounded slave was 30 shekels of silver. So he's paying half the price and then some stuff. And this is just me guessing, assuming, and we don't, that's just my disclaimer here, but it seems to me like he doesn't have enough cash to pay for her. And so he's scrounging up, okay, I've got 15 shekels and then I've got an omer and a half of barley. Sure, I'll try to trade this. Like, he's giving everything for her. He pays an enormous price. And here is the message. And this story undergirds the entire book. The whole reason that God does this is so Israel can have a first-hand picture of what it looks like and what it feels like to the core of their being when God saved them. God rescued them from Egypt. God brought them up and showed them powerful things. He led them through the promised land. He killed armies with hailstones. He did all these incredible things to rescue his people. And then they ran off on him again. And over again, he rescues his people. And they run off on him. And he rescues his people. And God wants us to feel what that feels like. There's a reason he uses the marriage relationship. I mean, I know probably statistically speaking, some of you listening to this lesson have had an unfaithful spouse. That's just the statistics. I know how many people will probably end up listening to these. And that's a difficult thing. Like, to me, there's not much more of a bigger hurt than something like that. And those of us that haven't had that happen can still start to try to imagine what that would feel like. It makes me sick to my stomach to even think. And not just that, continued unfaithfulness, and then having to take them back and knowing this could happen again. But yes, Samantha, yeah, God, he showed us compassion just like God does when we run away, over and over again and over and over again. And so it's a beautiful story, but it's a gut-wrenching story. And I love this. I want to revisit chapter 2 because chapter 2 is one of my favorite chapters. One of the things I like to mark, especially in the book of Hosea, is the I will statements. You can see what God will do. And it's really interesting to trace those through. And so when you get to chapter 2, he's saying, I will strip her naked. I will expose her. I'll make her desolate like the wilderness. I will have no compassion on her children. I'll hedge up her way with thorns. I'll build up a wall against her. Like, this is heavy stuff. God is going to punish. I will take back my grain at harvest time. I will take away my wool and flax. I will uncover her lewdness. I will put an end to her gaiety. I will destroy her vines and her fig trees. This is an interesting side note. There's lots and lots of references to vines and fig trees. Usually they're in reference to peace and prosperity. When it says, everyone shall sit under his own vine and fig trees, that is meaning they're going to be peaceful. They're going to get to put away their weapons. They're going to get to sit and they're going to get to feast on the prospers. But here, the vine and the fig trees are things that are taken away. So this is used negatively. Um, I will punish her for the days of the Baals. Okay, but here in chapter 2, if you notice, there's a stark contrast between verse 13 and 14. He says, punishment, this is necessary. This is going to happen because I am a just God, and you have violated our agreement. You have violated our covenant, and I have to go here. But then listen to this. Listen to the change in tone and the heart here. Verse 14, therefore, behold, I will allure her, bring her into the wilderness and speak kindly to her. Therefore, I will give her vineyards from there, and the valley of Achor as a door of hope. Now, if you remember what happened in Achor, this was when Achan hid the treasures and they lost that battle against Ai. And so they had to come and root out the sin in their camp. And what happened to Achan? Achan was stoned here in the valley of Achor. So the valley of Achor for them is punishment for sin. Okay, that's equivalent to punishment for sin. So what he's saying is, I'm going to take the valley of Achor, I'm going to take your sin and your punishment for sin, and I'm going to turn it into a hope. This thing that feels like punishment is going to turn into a door of hope. It's going to change into a way that I save you again. And I think that's so beautiful. If you keep going down in verse 16, it will come about in that day, declares the Lord, that you will no longer call me Ishi, that you will call me Ishi and no longer call me Bali. Bali means master, and Ishi was the Hebrew word for sweetheart or darling. And so what he's saying here is, there's a time where you're going to come to me and you're going to call me master, because that is just how it's going to be. But what I want from you is the day, what I long for is the day that you no longer call me master, but you call me sweetheart and you call me darling. And what an overwhelming thing that our God loves us enough not just to want to call us sweetheart, but after all the betrayal, to still want that relationship with us. And so I don't know how you can read through things like this and think about God setting on a cloud with a lightning bolt ready to strike. This is a God that's offering every chance for redemption, that's saying, I'm going to have to uphold my justice, but please come back. I'm begging you. I love you. You're mine. And it's a beautiful thing. And you can continue and you can see all of the wonderful things that God promises. This story is incredible. And like I said, it undergirds the whole book of Hosea, this marriage covenant, and mirroring that marriage covenant with God and his people. Now, another really great chapter, an anchor chapter here, is chapter 4. Because chapter 4, I said in the first 3 chapters, you kind of get the picture of what's going on in the rest of the book. Chapter 4 is going to be the court case against Israel. It's where Hosea explains, okay, here's where the rubber meets the road. These are the problems that I have seen. So first we have, listen to the word of the Lord, O sons of Israel. For the Lord has a case against the inhabitants of the land, because there's no faithfulness, no kindness, and no knowledge. There's swearing, deception, murder, stealing, and adultery. There's empty violence, so that bloodshed follows bloodshed. Therefore the land mourns, and everyone who lives in it languishes, along with the beasts of the field. and the birds of the sky, and also the fish of the sea disappear. Yet no one find fault, and let no one offer reproof. For your people are like those who contend with the priests, so they will stumble by day, and the prophet also will stumble with you by night. I will destroy your mother. Your people are destroyed for their lack of knowledge. Because you have rejected knowledge, I will also reject you from being my priest. Since you have forgotten the law of your God, I also will forget your children. Okay, this is really interesting because this is a book about heart, and this is a book about posture towards God. And they lost that posture and that heart. And God's exposing his posture and heart. And so it makes sense when we look at the beginning, there's no faithfulness, there's no kindness. That makes sense to us because those are heart words. But then he includes something and he repeats it several times. And it's one of the big themes of the book of Hosea. There's no knowledge. That doesn't feel like a heart word for us. And so sometimes we scratch our head at this. But truthfully, and this word for knowledge is not just a head knowledge, it's yada. It's the Hebrew word yada, and it literally, it's the word when Adam knows Eve, when we know somebody so intimately. It's a very intimate knowledge where you know the person inside and out. It's a deeper than just I know about that person, right? And that's you are destroyed for your lack of knowledge. And if there's this is really interesting because you think about what you have in common with the people that you're closest to. Okay. I got my husband. I think about Aaron and Lacey that are going to be teaching some of these lessons. And the thing that makes them my best friend is not just that I know some random facts about them. It's not just that I kind of like them, but it's that we know each other inside and out. And we know everything about each other. We know what we have. The more we know about each other, the closer we get, the more inside jokes we get. We have this relationship, right? That's just bonded because we've shared experiences. We understand who that person is. We understand their wants. We understand their needs. We understand how to talk to each other. We understand what's going to be offensive to that person. We understand what they struggle with, right? Those are your closest relationships. So, in order to build a relationship that's really solid, you have to have intimate knowledge of the person. And that's what God is saying here. Israel, you lost your knowledge of me. And I want you to not think of this as dry book learning knowledge. You lost the knowledge of who I am. You don't remember what I've done for you. You forgot my law that you were supposed to write on your hearts so many times, right? How many times did God command them to write the law in their hearts, right? In Deuteronomy, speak of it when you stand up and when you sit down and when you lay down and when you walk by the wayside and when you do like always speaking God's word and writing it on your heart and understanding who God is and what he's done and never forgetting. But these people had forgotten. And this is the primary thing that they were guilty of. And if you look in chapter 5, right off the bat, the people that he holds most accountable are the priests and the leaders. The ones that should have been teaching them were the ones that were taking advantage of them and really just doing awful things to them for the sake of monetary gain. It talks about them like setting outside of the cities of refuge and murdering people on the way for collecting the bounty. Like this is just some awful stuff that the leaders were in, and it feels hopeless because you're like, if the priests and the teachers, if these guys were so corrupt, the rest of Israel doesn't stand a chance. But the truth is, they did because they were supposed to be teaching their own kids. And this is a hard thing for us. And it's a twofold lesson, I think. First of all, I am responsible for my faithfulness. Okay. I can't rely. I love my preacher. He's very handsome. It's my husband. He's wonderful. But I can't rely on him to save my soul. I can't. I'm responsible for my salvation. And we've got to be careful that we are not led astray by weak leadership, by wrong leadership, because that happens over and over and over again in especially the Old Testament. At this time, it was awful. We're responsible. And you see that. You see these bright lights of responsible people, right? You've got Daniel that stands up. You've got Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You've got Esther. So there are people that are capable of standing up even when the whole priesthood is corrupt and rotten. So we are responsible for ourselves. But the second really important thing, and I'm speaking to us as moms, um, especially moms of boys. I have two girls, and it is important for me to train them, to teach them the ways and to teach them things. But especially moms of boys, y'all, we have got to be raising our young men to be spiritual giants and to be those that will step up and be ready to take a leadership role, to be ready to step up into leadership. I was reading an article today. I'm helping edit this new magazine that's coming out in sometime this month, and one of our issues is on Joshua. And I was reading an article that Robin Donahoe, if you're here, hi Robin. I was reading an article that Robin Donahoe wrote on this very thing about training young men to be spiritual leaders. And it's not easy in this world. And it was a really powerful article. And it's it's a hard thing when culturally there's this push against male leadership, but we've got to push back. And we've got to build strong young men that are willing to step up and be the next elders and be the preachers and be the deacons and just serve and to love people and lead their families to heaven. This is so important because how much better off would Israel have been? I'm not saying they would have been perfect, but if at least the priesthood would have fallen in line and been pure, um, it made it so much harder. And you can see a lot of the corruption and things if you just read through the history, the First and Second Kings, First and Second Chronicles. You read through the prophets. There was a lot going on in the leadership that shouldn't have been. So that is one thing. And we can read through this whole book, and I really challenge you to. And what I want you to do this week is to not get overwhelmed. Sometimes when we're reading through the minor prophets, we get overwhelmed with all the language. It's very flowery, sometimes it's very poetic, but instead of trying to understand each individual word for what it is, try to take it as a whole and understand the metaphor. Okay, because sometimes we get so wrapped up in the minutia, we don't understand the picture he's painting. And Hosea is a picture painter. He's not all about parsing the tenses of the verbs, right? He's about painting you a lovely picture, right? Maybe not a lovely picture, but he painted a picture of, the marriage. He talks about that marriage relationship. He paints a picture of a courtroom. Later on in chapter 11, I love this picture. He said, when Israel was a youth, I loved him. And out of Egypt, I called my son. The more they called him, the more they went for them. They kept sacrificing the Baals and burning incense to idols. Yet, I love this picture, it's I who taught Ephraim to walk. I took him in my arms, but they didn't know it was I who healed them. I led them with cords of a man with bonds of love. Right? He's talking about a parent teaching their kid to walk. And he's like, this is like, I'm the one that held your tiny little chubby hands and helped you walk. And you can picture that. And I think like all of us moms can remember when we were doing that. This book back here, I wrote on Hosea, and when I was writing it, one of my daughters was learning how to walk. And it was like when I got to this, it was all the feels because I was like, yes. And he's like, I taught you how to walk, and now you're walking away from me. And so when you're reading through this, don't just get so caught up in each and every little minute detail. Take in the picture. What is he trying to get you to feel? What's he trying to get you to understand from this picture? What's the tone of this? And then the other thing I would say is a lot of times he uses places, especially Hosea, like the Valley of Achor. or Baal Peor, some of those places. Look those up. What happened at the Valley of Achor? Why is this significant? And those will help you understand the picture he's painting as well. So don't be intimidated by this. And don't feel like to understand any of it, you have to understand every tiny detail. When we get into the minor prophets, it's more it's more about a broad overview than it is about the minutia, right? The picture they're painting, like Joel is going to paint the Assyrian army to look like a plague of locusts, right? And so understand that there's imagery being used here. It's kind of like reading the Psalms, right? You're trying to get the picture that's being painted. Go ahead. We're running out of time. Go ahead and turn to chapter 14 and we'll kind of finish this up because I think this is beautiful. We don't ever leave the minor prophets sad. About the only book that we leave sad is the book of Judges. We kind of leave Judges on a gut punch level. But most of the First Samuel we leave on a gut punch, but most of the other books of scripture we leave with a positive taste in our mouth. Um, Here is no different. This one is a hard book to read. If you are really processing, I mean, there's a point where God says, I walked in and I pulled the sheet back and I saw you committing adultery in front of my face. And like when you read that, it just, ah, it's hard. It takes the breath out of you to really think about what that would feel like and to feel what God's feeling. But again, he ends on this beautiful note in chapter 14. Return, O Israel, to the Lord your God, for you've stumbled because of your iniquity. Take words with you and return to the Lord. Say to him, take away all the iniquity and receive us graciously, that he may present the fruit of our lips. Assyria will not save us. We will not ride on horses, nor will we say again, our God, to the work of our hands, for in you the orphan finds mercy. And then God responds and he says, I will heal their apostasy. I will love them freely. My anger will be turned away from them, and he will be like the dew to Israel. I will be like the dew to Israel. He will blossom like the lily, and he will take root like the cedars of Lebanon. His shoots will sprout, and his beauty will be like the olive tree, and his fragrance like the cedars of Lebanon. Those who live in his shadow will rise again, and they will blossom like the vine. His renown will be like the wine of Lebanon. O Ephraim, what more have I to do with idols? It's I who answer and look after you. I am the luxuriant cypress. From me comes your fruit. Whoever's wise, let him understand these things. Whoever's discerning, let him know. For the way of the Lord is right, and the righteous will walk in them. But transgressors will stumble in them. And so here's the crux of the message. Like, it does not matter how many times you mess up. And if you're suffering the punishment for messing up, because sometimes we do suffer punishment for messing up. But God is standing there with open arms saying, there's breath in your body. Come back. I'm here. And not just here, it's the idea of, right, the prodigal son. He was like, I'm going to go back and be a slave in my dad's house. And the dad was waiting there, not just to be like begrudgingly taken back, but like lavish him with all these things he doesn't deserve. And that's God. And anytime we're in a place where we think we're too far gone, here's God saying, no, you're never too far gone. There's breath in your body. Come back to me. And we see him make good on that promise over and over and over and over again. If you're willing to come back, I haven't left. I'm right here. And man, this is a humble thing. It's a humble thing for us. And it's a comforting thing for us to know that we can't ever mess up badly enough that we can't turn around and say, I'm sorry. I'm back. But it's also a comforting thing to know for our loved ones and to be praying for our loved ones that have fallen away, because no matter how far they've gone and no matter what they've done, all they've got to do is turn back. And as long as there's breath in their body, they can. And so this is one of those beautiful books. Like, God is sitting there. He has paid an unthinkable price to redeem us back, just like he did for Israel. And the message over and over again, it's really a twofold message. It's God will take you back no matter what. And also the message that God's going to protect who's his. Now, does that mean we won't struggle? No. There were faithful people that got taken into exile. Look at Daniel. But that does mean that God protects who's his, even if it means we just rely on the promise after death, right? There is promise for us, and God's faithful to fulfill that. And so I love, love, love Hosea. And I want to challenge all of you to go read it and really absorb all of the beautiful imagery and all of the pictures and the gut punch of like how awful Gomer is, but don't desensitize it in your brain, because we have the tendency to be like, yeah, all those Gomers out there, we're Gomer in this story. Okay? Internalize that and be grateful for what God's done for Gomer here. I am so excited. So Hosea, Joel is next, right? And I think it's either Aaron or Lacey next week doing Joel. So that'll be excellent with the locust invasion. So super fun. So read through Hosea this week. It won't take you terribly long. And then also read through Joel. Joel is super short. It's like 3 chapters. So you've got this. And then by the time next week comes, you can be a pro at all the locust things. All right. So, yeah. Have a fantastic day. And like I said, if you weren't here at the very beginning, we are going to give away 3 Finer Grounds books during the study of your choice. And all you have to do is comment on the videos. Even you can come back after and just say, oh, this was my favorite, or this was my favorite. Now, Facebook will take down the video after 30 days. However, we are going to be taking these videos, putting them on YouTube, and putting them on our website, so they will still be here. So don't fret if it disappears. You still can watch it. You can rewatch it. You can share it with friends. This is just the easiest way for us to stream it live. So, all right. Well, thank you, ladies. Thank you for watching. Love you all, and I will see you in a few weeks. And next week, you will have someone else presenting a lesson on Joel. So we'll see y'all later.